Hi, and welcome to week 6 of food cost accounting. We are going to finish off our semester together by discussing how to make a profit. The learning objectives this week are to analyze profit and loss, which is going to include increasing and decreasing revenues, how to control costs within a business, the difference between gross and net profits. We're going to look at some invoice and statements and interpret the data in those, and then discover what the break-even point is for a business. And then we'll conclude this lesson by talking about special events and how to price them, and the two different methods that we can approach a special events with. So let's get into it. So making a profit is always the goal in any business, but especially our food service industry, because margins are very thin in which we make money. So we really need to be smart when we're using our resources and keep the end goal in mind. So when we are analyzing profit, we are comparing our revenue to our expenses. So the revenue is the money that is coming into the restaurant. Expenses are everything that we pay to actually do the business that we have. When we see a profit, that means that the amount of money earned by the operation is greater than its expenses. And when we see a loss, that's when the money earned by an operation is less than its expenses. So you never want to be paying more to do business than you are receiving from customers. So in order to do this, we need to go beyond food and service. That is obviously the most important attribute of running a food service operation, but it cannot guarantee a profitable business by any means. So that means you need to know how to do all of the different business aspects in order to be profitable. Consistently making efforts to maximize your revenue, minimize expenses while maintaining quality standards is going to be the long-term key to success. What a lot of restaurants or food industry businesses will do is when they start to notice that they are no longer making a profit, they panic. They'll quickly change the quality of the services or food offered, and then that backfires because customers notice. They potentially might tell their friends like, hey, this business has changed since whenever, and then a domino effect happens and the business will end up having less customers, less revenue, and just crash and burn. So this is the toughest part of running a business like this, because it is a consistently changing industry, subject to so many different changes within society, that you have to keep your ethos in line. And this is pretty much the best way to do it. Maximize your revenue, minimize expenses, but maintain the quality standards. Don't change anyone's expectations. So this is what an income statement looks like. This looks like a fairly successful restaurant. Maybe this is a yearly, so this is a yearly statement. This is from January to December, which spans the whole month. And this is the total amount of money that the customers paid to the restaurant in that entire year. So pretty good on sales. However, the cost of goods is everything that the business had to pay to be open and run their business and offer whatever their menus offer. So we take what the customers paid us minus what we used as a business to run, and we are left then with a gross profit here. That is the money earned after the cost of goods sold is covered. From there, that would be a nice place to stop, but we can't because we have all of our other business expenses coming out of that money too. So once we minus the money earned after our cost of goods sold is covered from our other business expenses, that is when we finally see a profit. So you can see here that they had a 6.57% profit for the year, which is fairly good. So just a visual here. Again, remember that in order to make a profit, the money that you receive from customers is greater than the expenses you made as a business. When we see less money coming in from customers, but we have a lot of expenses, we are going to see a profit loss. And sometimes you will see negative numbers expressed just by having parentheses around it, and that's supposed to signify loss of sort, a negative number. So maximizing revenue, this means increasing sales and profits while reducing food and labor costs. You want to adjust your menu prices when necessary. So keep an eye on the market. When there's been significant change in some prices, feel free to update your menu to keep your prices current. However, like I said, do not change the quality of your food or service because positive reviews and recommendations are going to continue to bring customers in. This is key to not lose clientele by all of a sudden offering lower expectations of service and food. You'll also want to train your staff to be effective salespeople, train your front of house to know the menu very well, train back of house to cook properly and not waste products and be resourceful and be mindful. It's a truly hands-on, all hands on deck effort. It takes everyone in the restaurant to have this common goal and to reach for a profit because that means job security, right? Even if you don't plan on being there forever, it's not your own business. You'll move on eventually, but it's really nice to work in environments that have that common goal. You can also maximize revenue by some creative marketing. So beyond any like normal marketing where you would be just straight up advertising for your business on social media or offering coupons or anything like that, um, you can have events where you host lost leader menu items. Of course, that's not marketed that way to the customer, but it's when you see those really crazy sales in restaurants, for example, charging only a quarter for a chicken wing when it actually costs the business 30 cents to make a chicken wing. However, the business is expecting a large volume of customer to come in for that discounted price, and then therefore there'll just be more people ordering other things, drinks to go with the wings, different sides, whatever other service that the business has to offer to the customers. So when you host a lost leader menu item, you're hoping that profit is going to be made in other areas, other purchases made by those customers coming in that were attracted by the sale price. So um, hopefully it works. Most of the time it does, but if it didn't, just go back, reevaluate your numbers, and try again. So revenue goals, obviously, we want to see increase in revenue yearly. This is usually just a certain percentage that the business hopes to see, and it's increased based on the prior year. So, for example, a business just might set a goal of, hey, let's earn 8% more than we did last year. That's because small, consistent yearly increases are going to make the difference in the business. You should never expect to open any business, including food service operations, to just all of a sudden skyrocket off the roof, out the roof. You will you'll need time to grow. You'll need time to establish your clientele. Word of mouth does travel quickly, but sometimes not quick enough, and you'll just need to give yourself some grace period to earn a profit. So aiming for these small yearly increases is going to keep the business thriving. It's going to help keep your employees engaged. Like I said, having that common goal, working towards together creates camaraderie, and you have a greater potential at success in the long run if you consistently strive to do better each year. So our formula here is taking our original revenue, this would be what we made within a year, and say, hey, next year we want to increase by 8%. So we would multiply our original revenue by that 108%, and that will give us our new revenue. So here's an example. What is the second year revenue of a food service operation if its first year revenue was 160,000 and revenue increased by 8% from the first year to the second? So again, we'll take our original revenue here, 160,000, multiply that by 108% because that's 100%, meaning we want to make exactly what we made last year, but also 8% on top of that. And that's going to give us our new revenue. We changed our percent into a decimal, and then now we have discovered that we will have revenue of $172,800. When we are calculating increases or decreases, this is when we know the revenue from two different time periods and we want to compare them. So when we compare them, if the new revenue is less than the original, a negative number is going to be produced, and that will signify a loss. Now, if it's in the positive, that means you had an increase, and that's great. But sometimes we experience decreases, especially when different seasons bring different types of clientele around. So monthly revenues will fluctuate, and businesses should anticipate that. You can just study the area in which the business is going to be in, and you can discover peak season and low season and brace for those times a year, schedule accordingly, order accordingly, all those good things. However, you do want to see an increase in your yearly revenue always. That's always what you want. So here's an example here. During the summer, a new restaurant owner notices that business is slow and wants to calculate the difference between June and July revenues. June's total revenue was 50,000 and only 43,000 in July. What is the percent change in revenue? So again, our formula here is percent change is equal to the new revenue minus the original. So the new month minus the previous month divided by that previous month's revenue. Percent change here, we made less in July, so it will produce a negative number. 43,000 minus 50,000 and then divided by 50,000 brought us to negative 0.14. And because we want to express this as a percentage, we move that decimal spot over twice, aka we're multiplying it by 100, and we're looking at a percent change of negative 14%. So between June and July, we lost 14% of our revenue. Another way we can control our costs are minimizing our expenses. So recognizing that literally everything has value in a restaurant, every little tiny thing, down to the last granule of salt, to a napkin, to even silverware that gets rewashed because that's water spent on it. Like absolutely everything in a restaurant costs money. So to be mindful of everything that everyone is using, um, just to compensate for any small expenses that add up quickly, that's when we can see those phantom loss numbers coming up where we just don't understand where the money is going wasted. It's little things like this that can add up. There are many, many opportunities to make and lose money just by being mindful or not mindful. So we can control costs further by menu planning, purchasing, receiving, storing, and preparing and serving our food. So we're going to delve a little deeper into those. We'll take a break from the math for a second. So when you're planning a menu, first off, doing menu development is super important. This is you creating the document that markets the food service operation to customers. This should list satisfying food items with profitable prices that can compete with local businesses. So make sure you understand your clientele and local competition as you're developing a menu. Other considerations you need to keep in mind when you're planning a menu is what kitchen equipment you have and if it has the capabilities to produce the food on the menu item, especially taking into consideration how busy services can get. You'll also need to consider your current employee skill set, if they have the capability of performing the techniques required to produce the food on the menu, including when they're prepping and not making mistakes even before service. Also consider the use of seasonal ingredients and offer items when they are high in quality and low in price. And then also take into consideration the customer demand. All of the menu items should be popular enough to not waste ingredients on. So if you consistently are throwing away prepped product for an item that's not selling, that is time to reevaluate if that menu item should change or be removed off the menu altogether. And yeah, menu planning sounds like a lot of fun, but there's a lot of technical aspects behind it that will be a topic for another class. We can't talk about it now, but it's really, really interesting. So when we purchase food, this is us as a business selecting and ordering the required goods to make all of the menu items that we have. There are two aspects that you'll want to know and understand. And first is purchase specifications. This is a list of specific characteristics of a product that can be purchased from a supplier to ensure correct product is ordered. So this is just kind of like a catalog. This will include an item name, variety type, grade, and then how it comes, how it's sold, the count per case, and net weight, packaging type, all of that information, so the business can ensure that they're ordering the same, more or less same product each time. And par stock is the amount of a particular product that is to be kept on hand to ensure an adequate supply. This is essentially the bare minimum of product that you need in order to operate. You'll want to have that number be high enough so you don't run out, but also not low enough, or but also low enough to avoid waste. If it's something that's going to go bad, if it's perishable, be mindful of where you're ordering, but a lot of the times businesses will use high par stocks for dry goods, things that have a longer shelf life, or something like chemicals where you just need the storage space to keep it. But par stock is the minimal amount you need to have, or the least available, so you don't run out. It's how much you plan on going through before the next order comes in. Hopefully that makes sense, all the different ways of explaining it. Um, and if you ever go under a par stock amount on an order guide, when you see that you do not match the par stock, you are underneath it, that's when you know you need to order. So, also creating an organized order guide for managers to use aids in purchasing. It not only makes the process faster, but more consistent, helps you prevent forgetting about certain things. Like I said, having those par stock counts on there so they know exactly when and how much to order really is beneficial, especially when you have multiple people ordering food. You want to have more or less everyone be on the same page when they do that. Then when you receive food, obviously quality control from suppliers. You'll want to inspect the food upon delivery, reject anything that is not up to your standard, maintain your invoices, and then be sure to get those refunds or replacement items if you are unhappy with a product. For items that are perishable, these have our short shelf lives. These are subject to spoilage and decay. These should be purchased frequently and in the smallest amounts possible. So don't go overboard with these perishable foods. Non-perishable foods, though, do have a longer shelf life, sometimes from 6 months to a year. These can be stored at room temperature. However, some may need to be refrigerated after opening. So again, just take that into consideration. When you store food, make sure you put items away as received and ensure that everything is in its right place. Don't have, cans of olives in 3 different places in the dry storage area. Make sure they're all kind of grouped together by brand. Be perfect. Keeping everything organized helps with ordering. It helps with the manager who's doing ordering. It helps with the person who's putting away the food, that everything is already kind of grouped together. Consolidate containers. If a container has a small amount of product in it, go ahead and put it into the smallest container possible. And then this just helps make room for the next order. And it just looks nice. It looks really nice. I like how it looks. The classic acronym that we all know, or most of us do, is FIFO. That stands for first in, first out. That means the oldest dates are in front. That's the first product that you had received in. And then the newer items are going behind that. So if you're not doing that already, do that at home. Then when we are preparing and serving food, we are accounting for our trim. So we're managing the waste that's coming off raw products. We are factoring that loss back into the price, or we are using the trim in other places. Utilize those leftovers when it's safe to. If you have ingredients that are still within the safety parameters, you can repurpose in other ways to avoid waste. And then, of course, portion control. This is the process of ensuring that a specific amount of food or beverage is given at a given price. This is so important for maintaining expectations with guests, too. You don't want guests to come one day and be served heavy handed and then come back like in a week and be served differently. It will eventually create distrust in the customer, and that may lead them to not return or start complaining, or leaving bad tips, any sign of disappointment they could express. So it helps keep the relationship healthy and the expectations consistent. So in the kitchen, though, or front of house, back of house, whoever is working with items to be served, we're using portion control equipment. And when the quantity of the food is greater than the menu price, that's when food expenses increase and profit decreases. So again, don't give customers more than what was costed out to be put on a single plate, because then they're getting more food but paying the same amount that the lesser amount of food costs. So you are not earning any more money from the customer by doing that. Maybe a better tip, but that's not helpful for the business. So now a closer look at profit. We have to look at gross profit and net profit. Gross profit is the calculated difference between total revenue and the cost of goods sold. So that's just total revenue minus cost of goods sold is our gross profit. And then net profit is the step further. That is taking the gross profit and subtracting our operating expenses from it. And that is essentially the number that the business has made within that certain time frame, like actual money that is free from any other deductions. So our standard profit and loss statements are the financial statuses of a business. This is a form that's going to show the revenue, expenses, and resulting gross and net profit, which may sometimes say a loss, over a specific period of time. The net profit is usually the literal last line in the document, and sometimes it gets the nickname of the bottom line. We've also seen this represented in pie charts, which is a nice visual way to look at it, but it is always accompanied with an actual itemized statement. And we'll see an example here in a minute. This will express our financial information as percentages, but you're also going to see the money as well. This will help you track changes in expenses from different time periods. And this is because it's always going to be in relation to the total revenue for the month. So just a blank example on our left here, we see revenue breaking down into sales and other income. So this is how much money that the customers paid us. And then the expenses are everything that follow: cost of goods, labor, rent, all of the fixed costs. And that leaves us with our total costs to run the business. A total revenue minus total expenses is going to give us that net income. So this is a really basic statement. This one goes a little bit more in depth. So here again, the numbers surrounded by parentheses signify a negative number. So it's not always going to be with a negative sign in front of it, but we can, especially since it's under the cost or expense chart, we know that this is a deduction made to the business. So this is how much it costs us to run the business for the month. And then our total income is broken down again into the different areas, leaving us with total sales here. So this is all of the sales added up. And then our sales minus how much it costs us to run the business is our profit here. But this is just the gross profit. So, especially when you are opening a business, you may have to estimate a profit and loss statement. This is a projected calculation used with approximate numbers, but it's also based on research experience and judgment. There are going to be certain assumptions made, though, for sure. It's not going to be a not a crystal ball. It's not going to tell you how much money you're going to make. It's a hope, a desire, but try to be as practical as possible. So the key here is to look for your break-even point. This is the minimum amount of revenue a food service operation must have before turning a profit. So this is covering the fixed expenses and our variable expenses. The fixed expenses are the business expenses that are rarely fluctuating. So this is like rent, utilities, salaries for managers, taxes, and insurance. These are, like I said, not really changing. Our variable expenses are, though, the percentage of revenue needed to pay for expenses that vary monthly. So the cost of goods sold, the hourly payroll, supplies, other expenses that the business doesn't see frequently. So the formula here is break even point is equal to the fixed expenses. So again, the expenses that don't change divided by 100% minus that variable expense percentage. So this is some information that you would have to calculate on your own. So here is an example. Chef has estimated that the fixed expenses for rent, utilities, and management staff payroll will be $24,000 a month. Based on restaurants offering similar food and service, the variable expense will be about 45% of sales. So it looks like he just pulled this number from local businesses. What is this restaurant's break-even point? So again, he is estimating fixed expenses to be $24,000 divided by 100% minus that estimated 45% of variable expenses. That brings us to $24,000 divided by 55%. Change that into a decimal. And our break-even point is $43,000, 636 a month. And that is what we would need to pull in revenue just to cover those expenses. And then everything after that is potential profit. So when determining an estimate, keep in mind that about 50% of new restaurants are going to fail within their first 5 years. And this is due to a lot of the time businesses just being in over their heads. They haven't done the necessary math. They're not marketing their food right. The quality is questionable. There's a lot of different reasons why. But if you are constantly using estimates to prepare for those possible scenarios until you have real data that can be interpreted, you're going to be in a better spot than those businesses that don't do this. So again, you can use current and local research to develop the estimates. You'll want to use that break-even analysis to determine your profitability. So divide the break-even point by the average amount of customers to discover the minimum amount each customer needs to spend to generate revenue. So think of this as like the contribution margin, not butter. The contribution margin. So you're taking that break-even point, and if you have 2,000 customers, you're going to divide that by 2,000, and you need each customer to spend this amount. So that can give you an inclination of how much product you need to sell or the menu pricing that you have to offer. And then for example, if you're opening a second location with the same menu, determining estimate is a little bit different, and that's what this formula is down here at the bottom. You can use the data from the first location to estimate your monthly expenses. But again, this is only if the business has the same menu or same service being offered, because obviously if it was different, then you have no clue of like what the reaction is going to be. But you've made a name for yourself. You want to have a second location in a different area. You are going to expect some differences, but you're hoping that this second business is going to be similar, if not better, to your current business. Then, so you'll have your same variable expense percentage at the first location. Again, these are the expenses that are constantly changing. You're just going to use the same percentage just to make this estimate. And then estimate your average customer at the new location in order to have an estimate of your total profit. So here is an example of opening a second location. A breakfast spot is considering opening a second location with the same menu. The owner expects each customer to spend about $9.80 as they do in the original location. So again, using information that they already have. For approximately 4,000 customers a month, that is an estimate for the new building. This should generate about $39,000 to $39,200. So that number came from multiplying the average that the owner expects each customer to pay, which is what they pay at the first restaurant, which again, like that could be different, but if it's the same menu, it should be more or less the same. They are guessing that they're going to see about 4,000 customers a month. So $9.80 multiplied by 4,000, and that's how we got this $39,200. The fixed expenses for this new restaurant will be $19,000, and the first location's variable expense percentage is 40%. What is the estimated total monthly expense for the new location? So again, our formula here is fixed expenses plus, first we have to find total revenue multiplied by that variable expense percentage, and that's going to give us our total expense cost. So our fixed expense was $19,000. We're going to figure what that projected revenue is multiplied by the first location's variable expense. So $19,000 plus, when we solve the parentheses, $39,200 multiplied by 0.4. That gives us $15,680. So now we can solve $19,000 plus 15,680. We're looking at $34,680 as our total expenses for the new business. Again, this is an estimation that they created. So enough of that. Let's talk about special events, because we still need to make a profit on these events. So it's important to cover some more details with customers. This is way more engaging than someone coming in just ordering off a menu. You will need to know how many people are coming, how many guests that are expected for this event, because this is going to determine the amount of food, staff, and event space needed. And most events are priced on a per person basis. So this is also important for the customer to know, because that completely dictates how much money they are going to spend. You will want to discuss the type of seating, because this also determines the amount of event space and equipment needed. If it's a sit-down dinner, obviously you need tables and chairs for everyone. But if it's a cocktail event, you aren't necessarily providing seats for every person who's coming. Obviously, discuss the menu. This is where events have the most controllable cost. So it just depends on the customer and what they are willing to spend. Usually businesses can work within a certain budget, but in the end, there does have to be a certain amount of money spent in order to make some profit off of every event. You'll also want to discuss the style of food and beverage service, because this is going to determine, again, the amount of food, beverages, staff, equipment, and event space needed. We'll want to talk about rentals, if there's anything that is not already provided by the facility, caterer, or company. You'll need to discuss entertainment, not that it's usually planned by the restaurant or the business doing the food service, but you'll maybe need to take event space into consideration for that event. You also want to discuss transportation for offsite events, take into consideration the labor and gas prices when creating the final cost. And then finally discuss the deposit and method of payment. A deposit is usually just a percentage of the estimated cost to be paid for the event. You'll want to determine a refund policy with the client, and then go ahead and document that in a contract and have all parties involved sign, just in case there are any issues. You have formal legal paperwork to prove your part in the planning. So when we are calculating event profit and loss, we're going to see some food cost percentage pricing methods come back, and the contribution margin as well. So we'll talk about food cost percentage first. This also might be known as target cost percentage, and that's because it's like a target goal. This is including other aspects of the costs to include to make profit in the end. Using the food cost percentage pricing method is most appropriate for smaller events limited to serving food and beverages in a traditional atmosphere. So think of like party rooms and restaurants. The net profit is still a little difficult to determine because the fixed expenses and operating costs are applied to the operation as a whole and not just to one event. So it's hard to isolate the amount used during that specific event. So that's why it's kind of a little tricky. But having the typical net profit percentage for a business can create an estimate in the end. Our formulas here, we're going to see on the next page as well. But to find the cost per person, this is when we factor in the as served cost, which is just the like the cost per plate, and ingredients divided by the food cost percentage, or again, that target cost percentage, you might see that is the cost per person. And then taking the total event revenue, again, how much the customer paid for the event minus the cost of goods sold, everything that was needed for the event. And that is going to give us our gross profit. And I believe, yep, so I just explained all of that, but here it is again. So the formula using food cost percentage, we're taking into account the as served cost. This is what it's costing us to make each dish, divided by the food or target cost percentage, and that's going to give us our cost per person. This is what we are going to charge to the guest to cover the food and costs and make a profit. Total revenue, again, is how much the customer paid. This does include taxes and gratuity, anything that the event space and the clientele are in agreement with, minus the cost of goods or the ingredients used during the event. And that's going to give you the gross profit of the money earned without fixed expenses taken into account. So just a quick example, calculate the food and beverage subtotal for 50 guests with an as served cost of $8.90 and a 28% food cost percentage. So again, the as served cost or cost of a single plate, whatever that is $8.90 divided by 28%. That is just expressed as a decimal. And we're looking at 31.78 for each person. I left our extra pennies on because we're not quite done. So I'm taking that cost per person, multiplying it to how many people we are expecting for this event, and that is a subtotal of $1,589.29. So let's say that this customer paid $3,500 for this event. What is our gross profit? We're taking what the customer paid us, $3,500 minus $1,589.29, and we're looking at a gross profit of $1,910.71. So a pretty good return on that. Then we can also do a contribution margin pricing method when calculating event profit and loss. This is most appropriate for larger events because it's going to help cover those temporary costs like event staff, rentals, and other things needed. A thorough planning here is the best way to create an estimate. So you'll want to itemize all of the food expenses, rental items, and payroll expenses to determine a cost per person. Include that specific contribution margin, again, that is determined by the business, and then include gratuity, taxes, anything else to give the final quote. But even so, the net profit is still a little difficult to determine unless you have the typical net profit percentage for the business, and then you can create an estimate. So, concluding our summary, profit is earned when the total revenue is more than total expenses. The types of profit we looked at are gross profit, that is the difference between the revenue and cost of goods sold. And then our net profit is the difference between the gross profit and operating expenses. So that is truly the profit that was made. And you'll want to determine break-even points to ensure profitability. The general tips in doing so are maximize your revenue, minimize your expenses, offer quality food and service, and consistently monitor and revise your menu and your operation. So keep it running tight. So congratulations, you have officially completed Culinary 826, that is food cost accounting. Thank you so much for sticking with me for the last 6 weeks. We started all the way at the beginning with culinary math basics, just going over the basic units of measure, the metric system, and how to convert between those systems and between different units of measure. We use that information then to start converting recipes by scaling them up and scaling them down. We also learned how to adjust their portion sizes and how to apply yield percentages along the way. Then we took that information from those first 2 weeks and jumped into food cost and control. We learned all the different costs. We learned how to apply those costs to recipes. And then we worked in our spreadsheets or the food cost forms. Then we continued learning about yield tests and baker's percentages. We conducted some of the yield tests in person, which was super fun. You guys worked on a butcher's yield test worksheet. We discussed cooking loss yields, and you guys practiced a lot with using baker's percentages. Then we finally started wrapping up everything and going a little bit more conceptual. We started talking about operation accounting. Similar to food costing, we learned about beverage costing, different pricing methods, and all the business expenses, why everything is so expensive to eat out. And then right now, we just finalized everything and talked about how to make a profit as a business. So I'm really glad you guys stuck around with me. And I hope you learned, I hope you leave knowing more than what you started with. So, yeah, I mean, congratulations, guys. I'll see you in class.